For some months now, we've attempted to arrange opportunities for conversations with individuals who have been historically connected to communities of color. We've tried to create these kinds of conversational opportunities because it is important to empower and encourage and inspire those of us who live in these communities, and especially young people of color. Our guest today is Mr. Bernard James, an individual who is indigenous to communities of color, in this particular case, the village of Harlem. Mr. James is a Vietnam veteran. He's a civil engineer. He's a photographer. And he's a man of substance who has a passion for celebrating who we are as a people and the sanctity of our neighborhoods and the sanctity of our communities and the sanctity of our struggle. So it gives me great pleasure to sit in the company of Mr. James this afternoon. We'd just like to have an informal conversation, and I'd like to ask you some questions. But I'd like to begin, since you are indigenous to the village of Harlem, I'd like to ask you, what was it like for you as a young man growing up in the village of Harlem?
Well, growing up in this neighborhood, it was like, you might say, a whole new world for a young child growing on the floor of 370 Manhattan Avenue. That's the building that was straight for life there. And also, were born at the hospital Sydenham, February 5th, 1946. And at that time, I didn't know what life was all about until the family of William H. James took care of me. And living in this neighborhood and growing up in the community, as you see the people and the friends that you meet, you say, wow, what an experience, a writing a chapter to your life of history. But most of all, there are people in my life that I really cherish, mostly my father, Mr. William H. James, and my mother, and also my brother and my sisters. They played an important part in my life. And being from the South, my family's from the South, proud of them. But most of all, I don't have an accent as many other people that come from the South. But first of all, my father said, I don't want him having that accent and him talking like he's on the farm somewhere. And I said, well, Dad, what is wrong with that? And he said, no, I don't want you talking that way. And the fact that you're up north, and this is what life is. You don't live in the South anymore. But as he told me, the experience he went through of being in a school, segregated, Baltimore, my mother was Baltimore, South Carolina, and she was living in that time where everything was segregated. And people stuck together, but the fact was that it was their future. And as I began to learn the civil rights movement during that time, and hearing the king of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, and how they were fighting for civil rights, which is very important because I never knew what that was all about until I learned what my father told me about what it is to be told to sit to the back of the bus, and you're allowed to come into a house unless you request it, and you were looked upon as you were nothing. So in the sense that my mother told me about the crisis, but she's being glad that you're up here in New York City, you can ensure the blessings that you don't have down there.
So the people who tend to say that whether you're up north or down south, if you were in the throes of that racism and the difficulties that we had as a people, which were the consequence of our being black, people of color, if you were below the Canadian border, you were supposedly down south. But I want to talk about you for a minute. So you as a man, as a black man, growing up here in the village of Harlem, what is it that shaped you to the point and allowed you to believe and dream that you could become a civil engineer?
Well, actually, there were two people in my life. My father was a postal worker. He worked 35 years as a carrier and a clerk, supporting the family. He was always stressing education. He said, I don't want you growing up knowing how to not to read, not to write. My father had perfect penmanship. And he always got after me. I would make the T as it is, dot the I, and I said, okay, Dad. Then he always pressed on reading. Fortunately, I never knew I had these things, but I was turned on to books, because we had books in the house. The National Geographic magazine was like a treasure, a globe. Fortunately, I said, Dad, you know, what are these things? I asked questions about science, and he didn't put much emphasis on science, but he always put emphasis on getting an education. But he said, I didn't have that opportunity that you want to get. I was turned on to books, because we had books in the house. The National Geographic magazine was like a treasure, a globe. Fortunately, I said, Dad, you know, what are these things? I asked questions about science, and he didn't put much emphasis on science, but he always put emphasis on getting an education. But he said, I didn't have that opportunity that you want to get. And he told me the problems we had to go through. But when he took me to Elmo, he was a teacher, and she saw that Bernard, he should be going to a school down south. He should be going to school up north here, because he's not going to learn his history or who he is. And my father said, no, I don't want him going down there because I don't want him dealing with the problems of segregation. He just was going to have to face it one way or the other. Elma and Lillian were up here to go to Columbia University for their teaching licensing. And they met a person named Malcolm Gray. I met Mr. Malcolm Gray there one afternoon, turned me on to jazz. I didn't know the various Columbus Monk, Coltrane, and many other people in my life that really, because at that time jazz was a big thing going in Harlem. But he explained to me, you know, and I said, wow. But one Sunday afternoon, it was a morning, I went to his house, and he said, I asked a question, I said, Mr. Malcolm, what is that ruler on that drawing there? Is that he says, that's not a rule, that's a slide rule. So I said, what is a slide rule? So there he explained to me what the slide rule is. He used to figure out math. And at that time, I wasn't all that good in math, but that really gave me an inspiration of what isn't a slide rule. So he taught me a small lecture on what a slide rule is. I found out how to figure it out. In fact, he even had a book and told me to read it. I was able to read. And from there on, I said, wow.
How old were you? How old were you?
I was on, the time I learned that, I was about 8 years old.
Okay.
And from there on, being that I attended PS 10, I skipped to the second grade. Miss Schweigman was my second grade teacher. She couldn't understand me, in a sense. So back to with the boys, making a lot of noise with the blocks. And I said, well, the children today don't play blocks anymore. But back during that time, these students were being trained about, you know, socializing in the class, second grade, reading. So I said, wow, I haven't learned much. But as I went on through life and going from one school to the other, when my aunt passed away, Gerald, she taught me how to read and how to write more. But she had cancer. She passed away. And she told me, she said, I cannot see you, Bernard, in Harlem Hospital. And after that, about the half day, father gets a letter or a call that Aunt Gerald has passed away. So that was the last of seeing her, of taking care of me. His grandmother also took care of me. But most of all, they really had something where my mother couldn't give me. So from there on, my father had to be a mother and a father, working, taking care, paying the bills, feeding me. A tremendous stress put on him. He said, I'm going to have to put you with some people to take care of you as segregates.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that there were those people around you, mostly women at the time, who unfortunately passed away,
Right.
who thought that it was important enough that you, Bernard, Mr. James,
Right.
knew how to read.
Right.
They tried to cultivate a love of knowledge in you.
Right.
And that love of knowledge gave you the foundation to become a civil engineer. You might say, there's a saying, a rather trite saying, some might say, or often quoted saying, it takes a village to raise a child. So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that those who were around you, in this case your aunts and your father, even though you were quite young,
Right.
they took on that responsibility to nurture you
Right.
and to support you so that you could have a foundation to acquire a decent education.
Right. Fortunately, the people that lived in the building also took a liking to me, and they asked questions about me, and they were asking, well, what are you going to do with this child since you adopted him? And I said, well, he's my son, I'm going to raise him as a child. And he gave me the attendance of not just getting child toys and stuff. No, this is things we develop. But the factor is that my father was really close to me, and he told me, I want you to be aware of the world out here, the problems, the drug addicts, the alcohol, and the other things that make up a problem we have today that you try to overcome.
As you began to mature as a young man, at what point did you make a decision that you wanted to become a civil engineer? And once you made that decision, or once your curiosity was piqued, how did you proceed in trying to make that happen? Were there people who discouraged you? Were there people who embraced you and tried to push you along? And what was that like? Especially during the time when you were coming of age and it was a much more difficult landscape for young men of color.
Well, fortunately, growing up in the neighborhood, the village of Harlem, fortunately, when I went to PS10, that's when I ran into a couple of classmates. And we were into comic books, playing baseball, football, tennis, and all that. But mostly Robert Jenkins was into rocketry. He says he wanted to be a scientist. And I said, Robert Jenkins, where did you get all this stuff? I know it. He said, I want to be a chemist. And he showed me his chemistry set. And fortunately, Tyson was in the airplanes. Then we started building blue model airplanes. And I said, wow. So from there on, my father asked me, what is that? I said, a model airplane I bought from the store. And you take glue and you put it together. And from there on, how to put things together from a set of plans was a whole development of how to journey, how do you really develop for something. We call them hobbies. Today, you don't hear the word hobbies anymore. Children don't have hobbies anymore. But growing up, a child will say, okay, you need a hobby, you need painting. Fortunately, I learned on television, just by having a TV to learn. There was no PBS or Channel 13.
So if I hear you correctly, it was out of that hobby, working with rockets and your friends and building those kinds of models, that planted a seed within you, and that is when you decided that you wanted to become a civil engineer.
Right, well that went further because when the father, well, he was a very unique father. He said, I want my child to get the best. He told me one day, he said, Bernard, I want you to get the best. I want to get you the best, regardless. What the white children get, you're going to get the same thing. So he bought me an erector set. They don't even have that anymore. I grew up with that. So from there on, I worked with little small beams and the screw and putting it together, building a tower, a pump, all these things. I said, well, what does this lead to? But I liked it. And I told Robert Jenkins, I said, this is what I'm into. He said, no, I'm into chemistry. And I said, it's amazing how these things come into my life. Then I went on ahead and I said, let me learn something about drawing. So I watched a show on television called John Nicky Learned to Draw on Wonderama on Channel 5, black and white. There was no color. And watching that program, I said, wow. So I told my father about this program. Finally, he says, what do you want for Christmas or your birthday? He said, I'd like to get for me, if you can get the John Nicky. So from that day, he took me down to Macy's. He didn't take me to A.F.O. Schwartz. He took me to Macy's after Christmas. You get a good sale. So he bought me the erector set in this box, it's like a toolbox. And I said, I'd like to get the John Nicky Learn to Draw. And I said, I could follow the thing on television. Well, at that time, a lot of people were saying, well, I think the lady at the counter, she says, you're buying this for your children? Yes. She says, not many black parents come in here and buy their children these type of toys. This is for white children. So my father told me they really looked at him kind of wondering, where do you buy your children that kind of stuff? But the question was, my child was to learn he should get the same kind as the other children get. So as I learned working with this, I said, wow, where is it going to take me to? So there on, when I came to Wadley, boy, what a school. Because at that time, it was the last year, I think it was 58. It was the last year of Wadley, not Wadley, but PS10. They were ready to close it down. So we were brought here, and this would be the school you'd be going to. So when I went to this school here, and I said, well, this is one of the best school that I went to, because where do you find a building like this on the elevator? Fluorescent lights, chairs, and tiles on the floor, where at the school I came from, we didn't have nothing like that. But in the sense that when I came here, I was ready to endure the education of learning. I had Mrs. Yerby, who was my 7th grade teacher. Very nice lady. She says, Bernard, you're very enthused. You're always reading the books. You're always reading. You're always on time, never late. She always gave me accommodations for perfect attendance. And from there on, I went to 8th grade, Miss Jackson. And that's when I kept up learning. I had Mr. Pierce, my science teacher here at Wadley, and I was very interested in science when it comes to knowing about, he asked questions one day about the apparatus of the test tube, and I kept raising my hand. So one of the students in the class told me, hey Bernard, give me a chance, you've been answering you got all the answers, give somebody else a chance. So I had for 7th grade, 8th grade, and also I had for 9th grade. And from there on, I said, wow. So I told Mrs. Jackson I'd like to go to 9th grade, a co-ed class instead of an all-male class. She said, don't worry about it, I'll see what I can do for you. But I had Mr. Lopez in 8th grade. Mr. Lopez is a very good teacher because I asked him the other day, he mentioned about CCNY, City College, he went there. I said, I'd like to go there to watch you wrestle, but I'd like to know something about that college. So he took me up there one day after class and showed me CCNY, and he said, well, this is what I was on the wrestling team. So I said, great. But I said, I have another question, Mr. Lopez. I want to know where's the chemistry lab in this complex. He said, I can take you around there. And also I'd like to see the architectural school of architecture. From there on, a couple of teachers in Wadley question the other day about books reading. And she says, what books are you reading? I said, I'm reading the Iliad. Wow, that's a kind of a hard book to read, you know. Then she says, since you have a very inquisitive mind, I recommend you read a book called The Fountainhead by
Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand.
Let me just add something, if I may, excuse me, because I want our audience to understand clearly the chronology of your development. If I understand you correctly, there were those around you from the time that you were a young person who loved you and nurtured and instilled in you a love of learning. So that seed for learning and the possibilities for education were planted in you when you were quite young. In this case, your family, and your father continued that. And that encouragement, to some extent, was allowed to flourish subsequently when you were in school. In Wadley, you mentioned those teachers who nurtured you, who supported that desire to learn. So we have your parents, or those who loved you, who planted the seed, those who continue to nurture and encourage you. And then as you went into school, there were teachers there, maybe not all of them, but there were teachers there who embraced you and encouraged you. And it was out of that structure, you acquired a love of learning and a desire to at least investigate what science and education could perhaps offer you. Once you were formed in the way that you were formed, and you had a sense of who you were, and a sense of the possibilities with education, and it was time for you to go off into college, something happened to you which prevented that.
But, you know, when I went down to the draft board, when I reached age 17 and a half, I said, wow, this is it, you know, during the war. And after hearing the crisis that took place with Kennedy, those three things really shocked anyone. The assassination of Martin Luther King, Kennedy, and then the issue of the Cuban crisis. And then came the fact that we're going to go to Vietnam. And I said, well, this is kind of crazy, you know. And my father said, well, I don't know what to say about this. And after seeing the newsreels and the war, that they're going to call up so many men. And the question was that, well, I have to draft, that's the law. So I went down and joined the draft board, and my father went down with me. And I said to myself, that was the day of, like, the end of my life. And they said, well, here's your card. Don't lose it, and don't try to destroy it, because you can go to jail for not having that. So I was, at that time, A2. And then a week later, I get another card in the mail, A1. So I told my friend that worked Jacob's supermarket, he says, we all got A1, that means we're all going to go into service. So I was transferred to Harry, and I got my diploma that day. I've never forgotten that date, September the 18th, 1966. The guidance counselor says, you're going to graduate. And I got good news and bad news. The bad news is you're not going to stay here. I said, well, I'm graduating in May or June. No, you're going to graduate now. I said, what the heck is going on here? So I went up and saw the principal of Harry, shook my hand, told me, good luck, whatever you want to be. I said, I'm going to college. Well, we kissed that goodbye, because a week later I get a letter in the mail with a token on it saying to report to Whitehall Street. And I told my father, well, I got to go, Dad. So Dad went down with me to Whitehall Street, getting on the bus and going to South Carolina. And then from there on, when I got down there, I said, well, here's life. And going to that Army base, the whole life changed. I said, how long do I have to be in here? He said, well, you're in the Army now. You want to go to college, forget it, kiss it goodbye. You want to go to the Army. So I spent the 2 years serving Uncle Sam, basic training in Jackson, EIC, which is at Fort Oklahoma, Fort Fort Sill, that was the one. Then I was learning how to fire a howitzer. I think it was a 105 to 175 howitzer. And then from there on, it was shipped to Vietnam and a unit over there, the 3rd to 73rd. And seeing the blood, the noise, the problems, the racism over there. He called the people gooks and all that. And I said, what the heck is this? What is this? So fortunately, after hearing the king was killed, and the men on the base went crazy. In fact, all over the country, we didn't even know much about what was going on, but I said, I'm not going to participate in that kind of madness out there. And he says, well, over here to fight the war over there in the white, in But the question came up, well, will I ever come back alive? Prayed every darn day, went to church every day, and hoping that there's a God to come and keep me from being blown away. But after seeing so many men come back in coffins, drugged up, give up on life, one day I knew in barracks when I came back, he said, you're lucky you came back alive.
Well, you know, as I listen to you and I listen to the stories of so many of our brothers and sisters like you, it's very painful because here you were, a young man, intelligent, a young man with all kinds of infinite educational possibilities, all kinds of horizons. You encountered at least some teachers who cared about you enough to encourage you. You were about to go off to college. There were those who tried to discourage you from going to college. They didn't want you to get higher level mathematics. And into this biography of yours, you get drafted into the Army, sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, encounter all of that racism. You go to Vietnam, where the racism is blatant and rampant. People who look like you were being called gooks, and I'm sure there were others who were calling you a black man in uniform, those same kinds of names. Yet, through the grace of God, you came back, and you still had the strength to decide that you wanted to become a civil engineer. So I'd like you to share some of that with us so that those who see us, who see you, can take strength and draw courage from that.
Well, fortunately, I came back and I said, well, let me see what I can do to get into college. So I tried to get into Columbia. They turned me down. I went up to City College, and my father one day said, why don't you go up there with your uniform? Maybe you get a chance of getting in there before those protesters. I went up there that afternoon, and boy, did they really give me a good welcoming. The baby killers, murderers, to spit on me.
See, that's one of the things that's important.
Hey, I'm wearing a uniform, U.S. Army.
Exactly. And you're a black man.
Yes.
You see, that's one of the things that we should never forget. And it's one of the things that we should remember when we look at our elders, when we look at those brothers and sisters in these communities. When I say these communities, I mean communities of color who sacrificed and struggled for us to be here. And in the true sense, this is why we've tried to create these opportunities for conversation. I mean, I consider you a hero. And it's that lesson, in spite of all of that madness, in spite of the things that happened to you when you were just trying to be a man, just trying to embrace your potential as a man, as a black man in particular. In spite of all of that, you were still able to persevere and become an engineer. And that's the lesson, that's the takeaway from all of this. So, as we move this forward, because another time is drawing nigh, as we move this forward, can you tell us what it was like for you when you finally got into engineering school and began to study. Did you encounter any racism there?
Oh boy, did I. In fact, it was the fact that how I got into City College was the fact that that day in the summer, the communities, the black community as well as the Puerto Rican community got together and marched up 125th Street. Actually, we shut down 7th Avenue where State Office Building is, and we marched there. And we go into City College. I never forgot that day. There must have been about 1,000 of us, young people. And we said, we're going up there, and we're not going to tell us to shut up or get out of here. So we went up there, and marched up to St. Nicholas, and we got to City College, 38 Concord Avenue. They shut the school down that evening. And we marched on the campus, and we told them we had to enrolled, and you're not going to tell us we're not qualified to come in this school. And I hope that this becomes a history. This is before they had open enrollment. That time, mayor was Kit Lindsay was the mayor, and he in turn wrote a letter saying that the school had to open the doors up. And that day, we would be the pioneers that opened that building up so these students come in there and learn.
You see, it's important for us to reiterate that. And again, as I say to you, it can be quite painful when I look at and I see what's happening to many of our young people today. There's not that, unfortunately, the kind of understanding of the sacrifice that you went through, and the sacrifice that those brothers and sisters of your generation, those who were before you, the sacrifice that took their lives, that scarred them. Again, having endured all of that, having struggled to make sure that people of color have the opportunity through that protest, and protest like that, have the opportunity to kick the doors down of those institutions and to make a way when there was no way.
Right.
Once you were in class, once you began to study, what was that like? I mean,
well, think about it, when I came up there and the Leverson Stadium was torn down for the academic complex building, which actually took them 4 years to complete it. It still wasn't completed. And I recall going to the South Campus, the North Campus, and seeing how some of the students finally got in there and they said, well, this is a chance of learning. I remember the class I attended was a math class, and I had a Dr. I think it was Dr. Smith, her name was, and she taught the second semester of calculus. And seeing that she saw half of the classes Spanish and black, and she just taught the class fast, speeded up. So I said, well, I understand what she's talking about because I kept notes. That's the most important part, keep your notes. Because if you don't keep notes, you really can't learn your courses. So the requirement was very tough. These professors up there, they care less if you learn or not. You had to really prepare yourself. And at that time, I can just thank God that I had my father and his friends that were able to fight for me where no one really cared about me. Kept me out of jail, kept me from being in drugs and involved in the gangs. Because we had that in Harlem. We had our problems. And thank God that my father, William James, he did show me how to fight and how to deal out there. Because if it wasn't for him, I would never survive. I wouldn't be sitting in this chair here. From there on, I was able to get a job at the city when I came back from the war. And being able to work for the city, build a bridge division of the Department of Transportation. But before I came there, I was working with the state. And the problems were racism up there because one contractor said to me when I was on the Newburgh Beacon Bridge, I asked for a guy that didn't have much of an education to go out and help the guy with the survey. But they found out you got a college degree in engineering. You were overqualified for the job. So I said, I never heard of that word, overqualified. So I told the supervisor of the union, and I said, well, he's don't worry about it, I'll get you another job. So when I got to the second project in Queens, the Flushing River Bridge in Northern Boulevard, I had a consultant there said, I like your work. So fortunately, he said, I want you to take care of this paperwork. 2 people did my job. Now that project, one guy came down with some kind of disease. He quit the job. I took over his position. We had 2 other employees working in it that didn't really care about the job. So Eisenhower, I think his name was, took the job. He says, I want you to apply out this application to work for the state. I said, okay, I don't mind working for the state. So I went to the World Trade Center and took a test that day. And I said, I'd rather work for the city than working for the state because I live here in the city. He said, don't worry. Till then, I got an interview for a consultant firm, Blauvelt, is the name of it. And from there on, I was doing a lot of bridge inspection, and the bridges in this city are ready to collapse. At the point, you wondering how it was holding up the bridge. But the fact was that the job had to be done. So I went on ahead and I said, I'm going to become the #1. And taking the test for the PE exam for the state to become a licensed engineer. It's one of the toughest jobs. And after taking the test twice, the first which called EIT, Engineering and Training exam, you have to pass that. Then you take the part 2, which is the design. But the question came to my mind, Bernard, well, do you really want to be an architect or do you want to be an engineer? Because they're 2 different licensing. But I had the knowledge of what a building is and how it's put together, the materials. So there, that played an important part. When I worked for various other consultant firms, right there on the racism was sort of being put down in a sense. But one firm I went to, the church tried to get me a job there because it was like I was a Catholic then. And the racism was popped up. When do you want to work here? There's nothing for you, that job. We got a job for you to deliver drawings. So I took that as a part-time job when I was in high school. And I went to a architectural firm, Eggers and Higgins. And I spoke to one of the architects and I said, I'd like to get a book on building codes. No problems. So he took, I think there were 2 volumes, and put them in a bag. He says, take them outside and study it. I never saw what happened to the guy, but fortunately I studied the whole thing about it and I said, well, I don't understand what building codes are. And from there on, I said, well, where do I go next? So I got a job working for DDC, Department of Design and Construction, that was created in 1996. And I worked as a project manager. A lot of these projects, water main projects, highway. We have a bridge division, but we didn't do much bridges. And they said, well, we need your experience in how to. So I had to read a lot of books. A good deal of my life is reading in a library. The lady that ran the 115th Street library, I almost grew up in that darn building. I always come there after school and read. On the weekends, I'd go in there and read. And every book, from the encyclopedia to the magazines, constantly reading. And after reading Architectural Record magazine, one teacher at Wadley, Mr. Drunker, was the one that taught me mechanical drawing. I was the only black student in Wadley in the 9th grade taking a course in mechanical drawing. So from there on, he said, he was the one that told me to go to City College, get a book, and I got the book, read it.
So how long did you work, because we have to bring this full circle, how long did you work for the city as an engineer?
Total of 28 years.
And I'm sure you were one of the few black civil engineers during that particular time.
I met about, when that agency was created under Giuliani, there were about 3 engineers in that building that from down south. The rest are from Africa.
Okay.
And some from the Caribbeans. Most of my best friends are from Caribbean, in Nigeria.
Okay.
My best friend, Innocent, he passed away. He did a lot of the work. And he liked to me. He said, Bernard, you're good in photography. I know you're the best.
And when did you graduate from City College with your engineering degree?
I graduated in 1976, 76 during the year of the bicentennial.
Okay.
And during that time, the stadium was torn down. We had had graduation in the Mahoney gym. They had the graduation there. And I didn't attend the cap and gown. So I asked for my diploma to be mailed to me. Because at that time, seeing a lot of people were being discouraged in the school of all this demonstration. Complex building was never completed. And the question was, what's going to happen to City College? And the fact that the students were coming in there, the departments were coming under threat. Black history was another one. I took Asian studies, which in turn I learned Japanese culture. And the teacher asked me there, she said, I can give you credit, but you already know the language. Who taught you that? I said,
Well, we can see that you are a very learned man, and that's one of the things that we give thanks for on this day.
right.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to bring this conversation, we've been talking for almost an hour, we're going to have to bring this conversation
This is the, what you see right here.
Let me just finish, because we may not have a chance at this particular juncture to really incorporate all of this, because our primary purpose is for individuals to see you.
Right.
That is the way that someone can be encouraged and inspired. And having said that, one of the things that concerns us as we try and make this our contribution to the world, to our people in particular, and to communities, and especially communities of color. When I listen to you, it brings to mind struggle.
Right.
That is what we've had to do as a people.
Definitely.
Your father struggled,
Right.
his father struggled. When they brought us from Africa in the hold of slave ships, we struggled.
Right.
But despite all of that racism and all of the difficulties that you encountered, you persevered. The fact that you sit here, you are an example.
Right.
So I applaud you for that. And unfortunately, we may not have enough time to give those who will see this a fuller picture of what you are and what you've been. If we could just plant a seed of curiosity, if they can see you and say that if Mr. James, despite all of that racism, and in spite of all of those difficulties, if he could become an engineer, perhaps I can do that. I think of Paul Robeson, and I'm going to say this, and unfortunately we're going to have to bring this to a conclusion. Paul Robeson, I once had heard him say, or I read where he said, the battlefield is everywhere. There is no sheltered rear. And what he meant was, as a black man, as a person, wherever we may be, there's a battlefield. It's wherever we go. So I applaud you. And I say to you that if nothing else, the reason for this conversation. The reason that it's important is that, as Malcolm X once said, a man without a knowledge of himself is like a tree without roots. He can't grow. So I applaud you, Mr. James, for being a part of that tree. I applaud you for being essential to us becoming what we were meant to be and do. I applaud you for having the strength and the courage and the grace to sit here. And it is my sincere hope that as you evolve and as you continue to be who you are, to give of yourself by your example, that the young brothers and sisters, and indeed the larger community, that will see you and come to appreciate you and celebrate your example.
You know, I'll tell you, one thing I like to say, there was one man in my life that really did a lot, and that was Elijah Muhammad, and that's Farad Muhammad. Those are the two people in my life that really did a lot to build a whole new sense of understanding who you really are and respecting one another. Because it was a time that we didn't want to call each other black. It was a time we didn't have no love for one another. We had to kill each other. And to this day, you know, we're not really proud of who we really are. And it has people like you to have that opportunity to bring this out. Because how many teachers you could find today or politicians to come out and bring out the root of who we really are? If they do, but after meeting you here, some time ago here, and I said, well, this man really has a lot to offer. Because some people have lived in this community and left and never came back. I came back, and I'm not going to leave. This is where I was born here. I come back to help those students that need that help. And every time I try to give out whatever I have knowledge to those young people, I'm here. It doesn't cost me anything.
And that's a fitting way to end this afternoon. Again, on behalf of this community, Mr. James, Brother Bernard James, we thank you for being here.